We're going to try and walk you through some of the things that have worked for the panelists in terms of their financing their films, and they're going to talk about the kind of problems that have arisen and the successes as well. So I'm going to go around and let them all introduce themselves to you. So I'm going to start with Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Horowitz. I'm a partner in H2O Motion Pictures. We're an independent production and sales company based out of London and Los Angeles.
My name is Tim O'Hare. I'm a producer working with a finance and production company based out of Los Angeles and Moscow.
My name is Stuart Pollock. I work at Indomitable Entertainment. We're a New York and Santa Monica-based executive production financing company.
I'm Mark Hutchison. I'm a tax partner with Rothstein Cass. It's a national accounting firm. I was with KPMG prior to that for a long time. I ran their entertainment practice. I do tax work, production, distribution, financiers, sales agents, kind of soup to nuts. Do the structuring on the front end, do transactional work during the life of the production company, do a lot of credit work, and then I do M&A on the backside.
Wendy Warren with First Republic Bank. We do film and television financing for all size films, 1 million to 50 million in budget. We're in a lot of the JP Morgan syndicated lines of credit as well for all the mini majors that are out there. And we work with independent producers, helping them get their films financing shape so we can move forward and get them into production.
Okay, so we're a pretty impressive bunch. And between us all, we were kind of talking about how best to structure this for you guys to get the best out of it. And I think one of the things that we've really established is that there seems to be some confusion about equity and debt finance. So we're going to try and clarify for those of you that are having any gray, sort of areas in your financing structure, what your best strategy should be in terms of finding private equity. And that means really high net worth investors or dealing with hedge funds or dealing with the equity, because unless you're being fully financed by E1 or a studio, it's really important that you identify sources of private equity, because really to try and make up your financing without it is much more difficult. So what we're going to try and do is give you some kind of case stories about what's worked for us, and the guys are going to talk about their own individual experiences. So let's start with talking about pitching investors and how best to do that and what sort of things have worked. So I'm going to start with Stuart, since you've had quite a lot of experience with that.
We have a high net worth individual in our company who's invested $45 million over the last 3 years in film. I suppose we are the most aggressive in preparing materials in terms of our pitches. We do 15-page finance plans and models. We have complete functioning models, show recoupment and investment for every single investor in the film. And we do, when I just consider sort of what you see in the marketplace, we don't do one-page finance plans. They're 15 pages long and the model works. So we do a lot of that because he's a hedge fund guy and he can run numbers. But I think we have more success with him getting him emotionally connected with the movie. He loves movies that are inspirational. We financed a movie called Soul Surfer, which is about a 13-year-old girl who lost her arm in a shark attack while she was surfing. So he loves inspirational stuff. So we started a charity with him that lends inspirational movies to school and after-school programs. So for all the number analysis we do, and I think we do as rigorous as anyone in the marketplace, it's really about finding something for our particular investor who he absolutely emotionally connects with. And so I think it's all about the concept of the movie for us, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, so it seems to be the more visual work you can do and the more you can get them over the line, the better. Because what you've got to remember is you're dealing with a guy who perhaps can't see what's in your head or in your director's head. So the more visual elements that you can have, the better. Make them see your film. So Tim, tell us about, with your financing hat on, when people come to you to pitch something they want investment in. What are the kind of pitches that work best for you?
Well, specifically, anytime you're talking about money, you want to talk about value. So you want to know how much something's actually worth, and you want to talk about collateral. So, so if you're going to invest in a picture, you want to say, okay, I'm going to invest, but when am I getting my money back? Which speaks to, we're going to talk about waterfalls a little bit. We're going to talk about sales estimates. We're going to talk about bank loans. We're going to talk about mezzanine, hedge, and other financing that might be in the middle of that. I want to know, and I want to be able to be articulate in explaining when in the waterfall do I recoup, and what is the likelihood of recoupment based upon the international value of the picture.
And we're going to go into a lot of detail about that. because that's where also you can really run into some problems, and we're really going to try and illustrate some things that might work and some things that definitely don't work.
But in terms of value, as a former packaging agent and executive, what I would look at is who is the filmmaker, and is there cast, or is that filmmaker going to be able to make a cast? What is the budget of the film, and then are the approximate sales estimates for the picture, including North American value, going to add up to 100 or more % of that
Yeah,
budget?
and we can
I'm
go-
not looking to look at a value that is less than the cash bonded budget of a movie.
And we're going to go again into more detail on that and packaging and how much you should have in place. Mark, what about you? What?
As you know, when we come on as a sales agent, we can come on in various stages. If we're coming on in support of then going to equity investors or other investors, we go through the same process. We look at the script, the cast, the budget, and then we can determine the value. For me, it's algebra. It's A plus B equals X, and every time you as filmmakers can replace that A, B, and C with a star's name, with some money that you've already raised, with the director's name, then I can ascertain a value, and I can get closer to a real number, which will then help satisfy these guys or help satisfy me that we can actually even get there. So the more you can bring to that table, the more I can help translate that into a language you speak.
So the more prepared you are, the better, and you basically get one shot. So we're really going to try and hone this down. Wendy, can you talk about from the bank's perspective how advanced things are? That I know you well, so pretty advanced generally, but what kind of works for you as a package when someone comes to the bank?
Yeah, the typical bank financing package consists of a film with an agreed upon budget. They will have talked with the bond company who's interested in bonding the film with that budget, with that director and those stars acting in it. Also, they'll have sales, pre-sales internationally. They'll be working with a sales agent that we're comfortable with, not just on the closed sales, but on their ability to actually collect from the closed sales and to make future sales. Sometimes we'll do an advance against future sales called gap. We try not to do that, and as time has gone on, it's been harder and harder to collect gap deals and to make those additional sales because the market is very fickle, and only certain actors will sell films in certain territories, and the film has to be really good to sell there. And now everyone's really focused on like these micro budget films, $1 million and under, and the tentpole studio films, because most people make their money on theatrical releases, and the $7 to $20 million films are falling to the wayside right now. So our package that we lend against will consist usually of a small equity piece, because that's how they get the cast and the director interested in the project. They'll have their foreign pre-sales with the sales agent we like, and then they'll have a domestic. And we finance those. So depending on what the company is and the terms of the sale, we determine an advance rate, and that all nets down hopefully to what the bonded budget is and gets the producer the money they need to go out and shoot
we're going
the
to talk
film.
about bonded budgets and so on and so forth. So Mark, if I can ask you, because you deal with a lot of high-end clients, traditionally, how advanced are things when they come to you? Do you come in early or always when somebody has a complete full package?
Later the better.
Later the better.
Yeah.
Well, this is what we've all been discussing, and it seems to be really that, and we were talking about it and how best to present this to you, but really what we would say as a panel to you is you get one shot. Don't go in with any private equity or a private investor until you really have every element in place that you can pull together, because you're trying to get them to part with cash and come into a very high-risk business. So move things as far forward as you can, and as I said, have your mood boards. In the case of Coriolanus, when I was making that film, Rafe would go in and actually enact scenes from the movie. And when sometimes he would go into the stabbing scene, which wasn't perhaps what I wanted him to demonstrate, but it sure as hell got their attention. But not all of you are going to be, as lucky enough as to have an actor like that be able to convince investors by acting things out. So we're going to talk a little bit about the recoupment structure and the waterfall. So I'm going to start with Tim. So you traditionally look for obviously the best recoupment position possible, but you're in a position to put in quite a high level of the actual budget. So what room is there for maneuver in your structure?
I mean, it depends on when you get involved in a production and when it comes to you. The earlier you get involved, you have a lot more control over it. The danger in coming to private equity late, as I've expressed repeatedly, is if a lot of deals are in place on a picture and they don't quite add up, and it increases the need for equity, and the equity goes beyond the level of risk tolerance, it's just a simple pass. So there is no flexibility. That I would go back and say to the producer, you need to have the flexibility to bring your budget down to an appropriate level that reflects the tax incentive in the sales so that the equity feels comfortable. So in terms of what the recoupment position is, then if there's a movie to be made, there's always a negotiation. But first you need to be able to show that the capital structure reflects a movie that can be made.
And this is what we're talking about, how best to try and position your equity when you've got a senior lender or you've got debt, and how you can give them a recoupment structure where they're not going to lose their money. Mark, what are your thoughts on the best possible position for equity where there is debt, senior debt, and MGs?
There's two extremes to it. I mean, if you can get to 100% equity, that's great because then they're in first position. But generally, equity sits in the back position, the last recoupment. So what you've got to be able to present to equity investors is an upside, is to show them that their investment is going to return as much as possible. So you've got to know in advance what your sales fees are going to be, what your hidden costs beyond the actual budget are going to be, such as marketing expenses, the cost of money, the cost of your attorneys. You've got to factor all that in and then see, can we do pre-sales? And if we do pre-sales, if we don't do enough pre-sales, no one's going to be satisfied that this movie actually works. If you do too many pre-sales, and here's the interesting rub, you might be reducing the overall ability for the equity investor to have something to recoup from, because you're tying up territories and thus value into getting the pre-sales. So there has to be this kind of balance between the two. It's a very hard thing to do as a sales guy, to say, I've got this movie, I can sell the hell out of it, and then I have to stop selling it for a while so that the rest of these guys come in.
It's strategic.
It's very strategic.
It's very strategic. We were talking about the US being one particular territory where perhaps if you've got an investor coming in with a reasonable chunk, you can give them a first position recoupment against the US. But now what we're finding is that increasingly sales foreign distributors are looking for a US involvement. So it's a devil in deep blue sea situation. So Stuart, do you want to talk a bit about?
It's interesting that Tim's experience coming into his company is the same as mine. Our investors both wrote checks for 100% of the budget. And the reason why we have our jobs is because we convinced them that they should never do that. And I would certainly say I would never approach any equity and ever ask for more than a third of the budget. And if I can get their equity to be 20% of the budget, I feel as though that's a really decent ask. And that's the sweet spot. So I'm always working everything to try and get my equity to be 20%. And I'm always working my soft. And if my soft overall isn't 20%, there's something seriously wrong with my film. And if I can get my soft money to 40%, then I think I've cured the magic of the film. And if you can get your soft up to 40%, then really what you're doing is you're greenlighting a movie, because if you need $18 million in sales estimates in order to greenlight your movie, maybe you've reduced your sales estimates to 12. And if you can greenlight your movie with 12 million in sales estimates, you've probably just doubled the cast that can be in your movie, which means you've probably got your film made. So to me, I try and maximize the soft money and try not to ask the equity for more than 20%.
And then two things, our model, we like to see less than 30% equity and know what we're exposed against. But also when you're talking about when we're being pitched, if all of those other costs and the recoupments aren't reflected in the pitch to the investor, to me that's amateurish. And if it's amateurish, it makes me very nervous going in. So if someone's coming to me saying, you're going to recoup after X, Y, Z, but I know there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G that aren't on that piece of paper, I think it's trouble.
So point one, get your waterfall absolutely as detailed as you can possibly make it. We're going to go into this in a bit more detail later, but allowing for residuals, allowing for SAG, allowing for your collection fees, allowing for sales agents catch up after the senior lenders come out, all of these things we're going to try and touch on. So Mark, in terms of the equity then, we think that 20% is, if there ever can be a sweet spot, 20% seems to be about the number. And it's always, I think, a mistake to try and go in and try and get any investor to fully finance. If it's a lower budget and you think, I might be able to get 5 million from somebody, really you want to try and get everything in place in as much as you can so that you've brought in every element of financing that you can. In terms of bringing them in early or late, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's solidifying the numbers. I mean, what you're hearing here is there's got to be X percent of soft money and maybe Y percent of pre-sales. A lot of those things, when I look at them, if they're really early, they just are pulling a number. Yeah, we're going to get 25% here. Well, I do this for a living, and they may say they get 25% in the state, but they don't get 25%. It's always something different, and it's usually not more. And then there's a lot of little nuances to it, how you structure it. I just, I'm more of the backside after the film's been made. It's with the production company, but I have so much of my time is done correcting errors that people do wrong and getting their credits. They've either put it in the wrong sort of entity that just is a tax nightmare, or they put it in another type of entity like Georgia doesn't respect single members. Well, if a single member is owned by a partnership, everyone goes, oh, it's a partnership. Well, fine, but when does a partnership file a return? I had one client that was a very substantial movie. As a matter of fact, I think it was the largest independent movie ever made, grossing ever made. You probably guess what it is, a few years ago. And they shot it in like January of, say, 2010, and because of the way their tax returns got filed on the backside, they didn't get the credit, which was big, under 10, but close to, till like 19 months later. That's a long way to wait.
And that ramps up your interest costs, guys. So
Yeah,
if you're
whether-
borrowing against your tax credit and you don't get your tax credit back when you're expecting it, and it goes on for 6 months or 8 months or 10 months, it's going to be ramping up a lot of interest. So I'd like to just throw it open to anybody that wants to talk about where equities come in around that 20% level and what's really succeeded, where they've actually gotten their money back. Can anybody talk about it? I want to make this slightly controversial at times. We just don't want to be too boring.
Stuart's got a recruitment model.
Well, to speak to your point about slow pay, we fully financed Soul Surfer, did 45 million at the box, and we're still negative. We're not going to be out on that film for another 2 years. So, we're spending the anticipated profits that we haven't got yet on our next film, and we're running deeply negative as a result. The timing of the film business is an absolute disaster. And we have a relationship with Disney International, so we know we're going to get distribution. We're going to go through all the pay TV around the world, and it's great, and we don't have to rely on sales, but we also know that we're going to see the money in 2 years rather than 6 months. So it makes it very difficult. Our experience has been that you just got to get down to 20% when it's our money, and if we're not, but then we've done, just done another film and we're not down at 20%. So we endlessly aim to get to 20% and we never achieve it.
Yeah.
And then we're just out.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of folks that are happier in the marketplace today than they were a couple of years ago. I think you've seen that the U.S. sales that are often the equity collateral have picked up considerably in the last year and a half, 2 years. You saw some big sales
Definitely.
in Toronto, so
Yeah.
the environment is certainly much better.
Definitely, especially where Harvey's being really aggressive at paying pretty big numbers. I can tell you that he paid $6 million for Philomena, which in terms of its relation to the budget was a huge amount of money. And I happen to know that there was an equity player that is going to be very happy, because you can sometimes, that's why I'm saying the US, sometimes it can be a good place to give your equity investor a first position against US, particularly if you've got a sales agent that's putting up a very aggressive MG. Because if they're putting up an aggressive MG for maybe 25%, they're going to want to take their MG out first. But quite often, they will give you a little bit of leeway with the US if you've got a private equity investor. And it can be a very good way of balancing things out. Although, obviously, as I said, sometimes the foreign distributors are really looking for a US participation. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And your sales agent, if they're a really great sales agent, which obviously we know there are a lot of them out there, but if they're a great sales agent, they can help you to get that case across.
I've never done a deal with an international sales agent when I'm the equity where I let them represent the US. And in fact, I represent the US and share it with CAA or WME, so as I'm getting an additional 5% on top.
Yeah, in this case, CAA wasn't involved.
It also brings up an interesting point, because from the foreign perspective, we pick up a lot of pictures. Most of them we don't get the U.S. But the U.S. is of value to us. The U.S. is sometimes equal to another star or a good director. So then the question is, when you bring in a foreign sales agent into this, is where does the U.S. sit? So if I don't have the U.S., I can live with that. But if the U.S. is going to be sold before I go out in foreign, that's even better for me, because it's creating value, not only for me and my sales, but also for the filmmaker. If I've got to go out with a cast and a movie that doesn't have U.S., it sort of skewers my numbers. It skewers my ability to present it. I can only go so far and sell it under the presumption that it'll have a U.S. distributor. And if it doesn't, then there's blowback. But if it does, then I've delivered what I could, but to me, I'm always looking for, a U.S. deal in place, especially a significant one.
But you also know that if you're looking at a project and you've got Stephen Frears and Colin Firth,
Right.
that'll feel demonstrably theatrical
Yeah,
to
no,
your
I'm saying,
buyers.
yeah, no, I'm saying that, but I impugn that already into the number that I'm going to have it. If it doesn't come through, then I get blowback. Then I'm like, oh, you sold me a Cadillac and delivered a Chevy, as opposed to saying, well, it's a Chevy, it could become a Cadillac, or make it a Cadillac.
We don't
Yeah.
like to take distribution risk. That's the Sundance model. You make 10,000 films, everybody applies to Sundance,
Yeah.
200 get in, 10 sell, 2 sell for more than $1 million. That's a lottery.
And half of the
Completely.
one makes some money
Yeah,
back.
yeah, that's a lottery ticket. We don't do that. We will gladly take risk, but we will have our distribution in place.
Right.
And if the film doesn't perform in the marketplace, we'll lose our money, but we're not going to take the risk that the film won't get distribution, because that to us, we do a deal with Disney International, going to release it internationally. We don't know how well it's going to do, but at least we know they're going to release it theatrically in Russia, we've got a shot. They're going to release it internationally in Latin America,
And that's the
we've got a
difference
shot.
between selling your movie to the studios and the majors or going the independent route. I mean, and we can get into that. There's upsides and downsides to both of them.
Well, a lot of independent producers out there have this idea that, okay, we're going to pre-sell foreign and we're going to hold on to domestic because that's where we're going to make all of our money. Once we shoot the film and it's amazing, and they're going to give us these huge MGs and we have a finished film to deliver to them. And the problem is, as many of you who have made a film before know, it's very difficult to make an amazing film. It doesn't matter how great the director is, how great the cast is. There's too much product out there, and the distributors don't need your movie. And if there's one little thing wrong with it that they don't like, they're not buying it, or they're going to offer you a very low MG that's not going to offer any value at all. It's not going to recoup the equity. So I tell people, go out and sell domestic, because you know what? If you've got an anchor of Sony, just because they only gave you $1 million and you'd rather have 2, well, you still have the whole back end that you can make money off of. And that Sony sale alone will double your foreign sales, because every foreign sales or distributor wants to know that Sony is putting out that film theatrically in the United States. It adds value right off the top.
Exactly. If you come to me and there's no domestic in place and I'm doing numbers on a global scale, I put 0 down for the U.S.
Yeah.
Because not only will they offer you less, but if they don't make it, they don't have to offer you anything. I mean, we get that conversation all the time. Oh, well, we could give you the $2 million, but then our fees are going to go up and this and that. But why don't we just put that money into P&A and we'll all play the back end? And that doesn't help your investors at all.
But that's my fancy, is when somebody comes to me with a project where they've got domestic interest at an MG level, and they're saying, okay, we're going to take an MG from Sony for $2 million, and the fees are 25% and rising to 45% in pay TV. And I go, okay, let's just change that deal around. Let's just take the deal with no MG, reduce the fees to us of 15%, and I'll give you the $2 million. That to me is the fantasy deal where I just go, that's a no-brainer.
And that's fine for me, because I still have the Sony deal as an anchor to sell. It might not help you, Wendy, when you're looking at numbers to see what to
Yeah, well,
lend
that
against.
just becomes an equity piece. We can't finance the straight distribution deal. We can only finance contracts that have minimum guaranteed payments due upon delivery.
So it's a balancing act, and it's interesting talking about CAA. If you're lucky enough to have a major director or a major talent involved in your movie, then for sure, however big your sales agent are, however big they are, CAA or WME, they're going to want to get in. Graham Taylor or Micah Green, they're going to want, Rogue Sutherland, they're going to want to be in on the US sale some way or another. So it's always worth knowing that that's going to, some way or another, that's going to happen. And it is a balancing act. As the guys have been saying, if you have been lucky enough to pre-sell the US, great, it helps the foreign numbers. But then let's talk about, you've sold the US and you've got an MG and you've got 20% in equity. So they're going to be quite a way down the waterfall. So the way to get equity investors in when they're going to be a way down the waterfall is obviously tax breaks. We have the EIS tax break in the UK, which has proven to be pretty successful in helping private equity, but try and look at where your equity sources might have some break available to them. I'm not familiar with the Canadian private investment breaks. I don't know, Mark, can you comment? Are there investment breaks in the US and Canada for private equity?
Well, I mean, just like any producer, if you get a 25% break on your budget from a state incentive, I mean, that,
No, I'm not talking about state incentives, I'm talking about the individual investor.
Like 181,
Their
that
write-off,
extent.
like
Oh,
a
I'm sorry,
181, we have E
I
EIS.
mean, there's a bunch, first of all, there's a lot on the backside too about structuring up front with a U.S. production, because we're at 55% tax rates if you're in California in the U.S. It's just if it's profitable. So it's very important to make sure that if you do have a profitable movie, you're structured properly to minimize that. It's a big number. In the U.S., we have 181. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's an expensing of a film as you incur the expenses, as opposed to waiting till the film releases and then amortizing those costs, the negative costs, over the income stream of the film. So 181 is a benefit, but it's just an acceleration. It's a timing difference, as we call it in the trade. There's other things that are small benefits, mostly geared to a profitable film that can give you breaks. There's 199. There's a thing that I'm working on right now with one of the tax attorneys in Los Angeles that gives you a tax break, a permanent break on foreign sales. So if you have foreign sales and your foreign sales turn out, if you have a U.S. produced film, 181 requires U.S. production too, by the way. If you have a U.S. produced film and you sell it in foreign, you can basically save 20% of the tax on the income. Well, first of all, you need income. You need foreign sales, but you need income. If you have income, so say you have $10 million of income, if you do this structure, which costs about 25 grand to set up, so it's a no-brainer, it can save you about $2 million on a $10 million foreign profitable movie. So.
And that's really, really important. Read up on this stuff. If you don't know about this stuff and you're going after equity, read up on it, because if you've got some really big high net worth and he thinks he's going to be able to potentially make a profit from your film and get some kind of tax break or tax write-off, that really helps in getting them over the line. It's not just about them having a passion to make movies like Tim's Russian, right? He's passionate about it, right?
Yeah, but we turn to Mark for our structuring.
Yeah, that's the important thing, is the structuring, because high net worth individuals, and private equity is always funded, not always, but funded by a lot of high net worth individuals. I'm dealing with a Swiss group right now. It's all, $5 billion families. They care a lot about taxes. And
It's the
typically
most
they're
important.
very, very savvy about the tax rules. And you come in and say, we structure it this way. I mean, sometimes they get more excited about the tax structure than they do about the leading woman, which is pretty cool.
That's it. Rich
but you have
people
to do
like
that at the
save
front
money.
end.
They like to save money on their
That's how they got
Seriously.
rich.
Yeah,
that's how they got
right?
rich in the first place. Probably they've all got offshore accounts all over the bloody place.
But it's important to do that on the front end, and that's probably the message.
It's really, really important. Without the EI, I've raised over £1.5 million in my company. And without the EIS structure, we could never have done that. We could never have developed our projects to the extent that we have without the EIS tax break. Because, they love to think, okay, well, if I put 100 grand in here or 200 grand in there, I can at least write off a percentage of it. So I'd just like to look around the room a little and see how many of you actually have had private equity in your movie, or how many of you are trying to identify private equity. Wow, quite a lot. Okay, so this is valuable then. We're not boring anybody, right? I just want to check.
Okay, I want to speak one thing on here. That you talked about sales agents and getting them on. Don't be afraid when you go to the sales agent to negotiate with them. I've been an agent, and you said there, don't just take what they.
Yeah,
what they
don't
ask as
take
a
the first
producer.
thing. Don't take the first thing.
And there are fees. There are fees in the budget. There are packaging fees. There are sales agent fees. There are commissions. All of those. It's all negotiable.
Start by beating up the sales agent. It's a great way to incentivize.
Get them down.
I'm not on the domestic side. The packaging
Okay.
side.
Well, thank you.
But there's something weird.
We just make you defer.
But there's something weird in the marketplace with sales agents right now. The percentage commission you pay gets higher the less prestigious the sales agent.
I know.
As you go down the food chain, they charge you more and more and more. And the higher up the food chain you go, you get charged
You get
less and
less.
less and less.
Well, I mean,
I've
but-
never paid a top sales agent more than 5%.
Yeah,
going
but
in.
but you're also doing movies where
bigger
he's
budget.
he's
Bigger
budget.
budget,
He's
absolutely.
going to do $30 million in sales. But the sad truth is, to get to Cannes, to get to AFM, to get to Berlin, it costs pretty much everybody the same. And if you're going to, you've got to work a lot harder sometimes to do $1.5 million in sales, because you've got to do a lot more arm twisting. It's not shooting fish in a barrel. And then there needs to be an adequate compensation for that, and it's hard to do that on, 3 or 4%.
Let's-
I mean, it's not that we're bad sales agents, it's just that we swim in different pools.
I want to do something else now. I want to see how many of you in the room have a budget that's above $10 million. Okay, it's like 3 of you. Okay, so we're going to really gear this then to the 10 million and below budget range, because that's sort of where I thought you'd all be placed. Because we don't want to talk about higher budget pitches because it's not really relevant to the room. So we talked a bit over lunch about the waterfall and the importance of making it really detailed. So Tim and Stuart principally are going to talk to you a bit about all of the things that you need to include in the waterfall if you haven't already done a really detailed waterfall for private equity. So, shoot, go.
Well, I like to see the entire budget, and then I make my own evaluation of where it is. But obviously in our recoupments, we go 1 to 7 off the tops, marketing expenses, sales agent fee, SAG residuals, collection agent expenses, collection agent fee,
Finance charges.
everything should be in the budget. I'm just assuming that absolutely every single thing, and we will vet every single line item in it if we're going to invest. You know, I mean, it's not rocket science to make sure that you include every single piece of reality of the economics of the film.
And
we're not going to invest unless we have absolute visibility on every single piece of that.
And at the end of the day, if it's not in the budget and we know it's a cost, we know we're going to have to write the check anyway, so you might as well put it in the budget.
One key thing, when you're dealing with equity, always allow the finder's fees in your budget. Because the finders are going to charge you, whether it's a hedge fund or whether somebody's introduced you to someone, they're going to charge you an introduction fee. And you've always got to allow for the total you're being given, you've got to allow for that net amount. So therefore, put their fees in the budget and then you're dealing with the gross in terms of equity.